Amira froze halfway down the staircase, her breath catching as the sound of something clattered against the marble floor below. It wasn't the sound itself that startled her. It was the deep, irritated sigh that followed. A man's voice, cold and low, muttered a sharp curse in Korean, and the energy in the mansion seemed to thicken all at once. She hadn't meant to walk in on anything. She had been told the boss was rarely home at this hour. But now, caught on the staircase with a cleaning rag still tucked into her apron, she had to decide whether to go back up or continue moving before whoever was downstairs noticed her hesitation. Then she saw him. Jaiwan stood near the center of the living room, back slightly turned, hands braced on the edge of a glass table. A spilled pen lay on the ground, and a folder filled with papers hung half open in one hand. His hair was slightly messy, like someone who had been running his hands through it too many times. He wore a fitted black shirt pulled tight across his broad shoulders and sleeves rolled up just enough to show the curve of tense forearms. He lifted his head slowly, as though sensing her presence, and his eyes locked onto hers. For a moment, Amira forgot how to breathe. She had seen him only once before from a distance, when she arrived earlier in the day. She thought he was handsome then. Sharp jawline, unreadable eyes, body shaped by discipline. But seeing him now in motion, in real unfiltered detail, there was something dangerous about the way he looked at her, like he was evaluating, analyzing, deciding something. And she hadn't even said a word yet. "You're up early," he said, voice low but controlled. It wasn't a friendly greeting. It wasn't a reprimand either. It was simply observant, like he was studying her reactions. Amira forced a small smile and stepped down to the last stair. "Good morning, sir. I was just coming to clean the..." "You're new." His gaze dropped from her eyes to the name tag pinned to her shirt. "Amira." "Yes," she said softly. He straightened, closing the folder with a soft snap. The movement made her flinch slightly, barely, but enough for his eyes to catch it. "You don't have to be afraid of me," he said, though his tone was oddly amused, like he knew people usually were. "I'm not afraid," she lied. His left eyebrow lifted. "You hesitated before stepping down." "I didn't want to interrupt." That seemed to satisfy him for now. He stepped around the sofa, moving closer, the kind of slow, deliberate walk that made her pulse stutter. His presence filled the space long before his body did. She noticed immediately that he moved quietly for someone his size, almost too quietly. "So," he said, stopping just a few feet from her, "what exactly were you planning to clean at 6:30 in the morning?" "The railing," she murmured, gripping the cloth in her hands, "and the hall floors." His eyes lowered, flicking briefly over her apron, then the rag, then back to her face. Something unreadable lingered in his gaze, curiosity mixed with suspicion. "You've been here less than 24 hours, he said. "You don't need to impress anyone." "I'm not trying to impress," she said softly. "I'm just doing my job." He studied her for a moment that lasted far too long, long enough that the quiet air between them began to heat. This wasn't normal employer and employee silence. It was charged, heavy, intentional. And Amira felt every second of it. Jaiwan finally shifted his attention away, picking up the pen from the floor and placing it on the table. "I don't like people sneaking around in my house." "I wasn't sneaking." "Then why were you walking like you didn't want to be heard?" She swallowed. "I didn't think anyone was awake." He turned toward her again, and this time his eyes softened by maybe 2%, just enough to notice if you were standing as close as she was. "Next time," he said, "walk normally. I won't shoot you for coming downstairs." Her eyes widened. I didn't think you would." His lips twitched almost imperceptibly, the ghost of a smirk. "Most people assume I might." A chill slid down her spine. She still wasn't sure what he did for a living. The staff avoided talking about him. Some said businessman, some said investor, but no one said it with confidence. No one said it without a little fear. "I'll walk normally next time," she whispered. He nodded once, as though pleased. Then, without warning, the morning tension shifted. Jaiwan stepped even closer, just one step, but it was enough to make her instinctively lean back a fraction. He noticed it again, and his gaze sharpened, darkened. "You don't have to shrink away every time I move," he said quietly. If I wanted to scare you, you'd know. The sentence wasn't meant to sound flirtatious. It wasn't meant to sound threatening. But somehow, impossibly, it sounded like both. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it, eyes still on her. "You're new," he repeated. "So I'll say it just once. Don't go into rooms you're not assigned. Don't touch anything marked black, and if you hear voices at night, never open your door. Understand?" Amira nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." He held her gaze a second longer, and she felt something tighten in her stomach, nerves mixed with something warm, something she shouldn't be feeling. He stepped past her to head upstairs. But right before he reached the top step, he stopped. Without turning around, he said, "Amira." Her breath hitched. "Yes." "You should wear your hair down more." Her heart dropped straight into her stomach. "Why?" she managed. A pause. His voice turned low, almost dangerous in its softness. "It suits you." And then he disappeared down the hall, leaving her standing frozen, breathless, and completely aware that her new boss saw far more than he ever let on. Amira stood there long after he disappeared, fingers unconsciously lifting to her braid. Wear her hair down? Why would he say that? He didn't seem like a man who paid attention to anything unnecessary. He barely looked at anyone. The staff whispered that he had fired an entire cleaning company once because one worker broke a vase and cried too loudly about it. So why notice her hair? She exhaled slowly and forced herself to move, walking toward the living room with shaky steps. She'd barely started polishing the railing when her mind drifted back to the way his shirt sleeves had been rolled up. For the first time, she noticed something she missed earlier: ink, dark and beautifully sharp, crawling up his forearms in intricate patterns. She hadn't seen the full design, only hints of black swirls and traditional shapes wrapping around muscle. But even that glimpse had been enough. He wasn't the kind of man who got tattoos for fun. Those were statement tattoos, territorial tattoos, the kind that told stories and warnings. She swallowed hard. Her boss was absolutely not a normal man. By mid-morning, the mansion was fully awake. Guards moved in and out, staff cleaned in silence, and Amira tried to keep her head down. But every time she passed by a reflective surface, she remembered his voice. "You should wear your hair down more." She'd never had a boss comment on her appearance. It shouldn't matter. He probably didn't mean anything by it. Maybe he just thought it looked tidier. Maybe it was cultural. Maybe. "Amira." She jumped, turning quickly to see Hannah, the senior housekeeper, watching her with raised brows. "You're distracted," Hannah said, not unkindly. "The boss doesn't like distracted people." Amira nodded quickly. "Sorry, I didn't sleep well." "You will adjust," Hannah said quietly, then leaned closer. "Just be careful around him." Amira frowned. "Why?" Hannah hesitated, glancing toward the hallway as if expecting someone to be listening. "Because men like him do not do anything without reason. If he speaks to you, it means he noticed you. And if he noticed you..." Her eyes softened with something like pity. "Be careful." Before Amira could ask more, Hannah walked away. The warning lingered far longer. She tried focusing on her tasks, but the universe had other plans. By noon, she was called to deliver documents to Jaiwan's office, her first time being anywhere near that part of the mansion. A guard escorted her to the tall black doors, knocked once, and motioned for her to go inside. Her pulse jumped. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Jaiwan sat behind a massive desk, half shadowed by warm sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. His jacket was off, his black shirt unbuttoned at the collar, and this time she could see it clearly, the elaborate ink winding up his neck. A black dragon, its tail disappearing under his collarbone, its head curling along the side of his throat as if whispering secrets into his ear. She nearly forgot how to breathe. The tattoo was stunning, sharp, artistic, powerful. But more than that, on him it looked right. It looked like truth. He looked up at her, pen pausing mid-sentence. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. She forced her legs to move and approached his desk. I was told to bring these." He took the envelope from her hand, his fingers brushing her skin for the briefest moment. Not enough to claim it was deliberate, just enough to send a warm jolt up her arm. He didn't look away from her. even as he opened the envelope. "You tied your hair up again," he said casually. Her breath caught, of all things he could comment on. "It's more practical when I clean," she murmured. His gaze lowered to her lips, then lifted again. "If practicality was your priority, you would have worn different shoes." She looked down at her simple sneakers. "What's wrong with them?" "They have no grip," he said, leaning back in his chair. "If you fall on the marble floors, it'll be my problem." "It wouldn't be," she said before she could stop herself. "I'm responsible for my own." "Everything under my roof," he cut in, voice suddenly firmer, "is my responsibility, whether you accept that or not." Heat flushed her chest. "That includes you." She froze. For a moment, she couldn't tell if he meant it in a professional way or something far more dangerous. But his expression didn't clarify anything. He just watched her in that same dark, quiet way, like he saw too much. "Amira," he said, "when someone like me tells you to do something, it's because there's a reason. Wear your hair down. It suits you." Her voice wavered. "Why does it matter to you?" Silence dropped heavy between them. Jaiwan stood slowly from his chair, the ink on his arms shifting with the movement. She could see more of it now, waves, clouds, traditional patterns blending seamlessly into the dragon at his throat, a full sleeve disappearing under his shirt. He walked around the desk, and Amira took a slight step back, unsure if she should stay still or move away. He stopped close enough that she felt his warmth. "It matters," he said quietly, "because I don't like being distracted." Her heart stuttered violently. De-distracted by what? His eyes lowered to her face, slow, deliberate, intimate. "By you." She couldn't speak. She wasn't sure she could breathe. But before anything else could happen, before the moment could shift into something she didn't know how to name, someone knocked. Jaiwan didn't move. "Leave it." The doorknob rattled. "Boss, it's urgent." His jaw tightened. He stepped away from her, the moment slicing cleanly in half. "Go," he told her softly. She hesitated, then turned to leave. But just as she touched the doorknob, he added, "And Amira." She looked back. His eyes, dark and unreadable, held hers for one slow heartbeat. "Don't walk around my house, looking like you don't know the effect you have." The words sank deep into her skin. Amira left without breathing properly until she reached the hallway. She didn't know what was happening between them. She didn't know what he wanted, but she knew one thing. Jaiwan wasn't supposed to notice her. And yet he did. Jaiwan didn't move at first. He just stood there with his hands tucked into his pockets, the ink on his forearms disappearing where his sleeves ended just below his elbow. His breathing was controlled, too controlled, like he was forcing every inhale to stay calm. Amira felt the shift in the air, heavy, charged, humming with something she couldn't name. He finally looked up, and there it was again, that gaze. The one that made her feel as if he saw straight through her pulsing nervousness, through her flimsy attempts at professionalism, through the way her breath kept catching when he stepped too close. She forced her eyes away, focusing on the paperwork spread across the table. "It's not even sorted by date," she muttered under her breath, hoping a little annoyance would ground her. Jaiwan's eyebrow lifted. "Are you complaining?" "No," she said quickly. "I'm just observing." "Observations," he replied, stepping beside her, "are only useful when you do something about them." She could smell him, expensive sandalwood and something darker. Heat rolled off him when he leaned over her shoulder to scan the documents. His sleeve shifted, revealing the tail end of black ink curling around his wrist in neat, precise lines. The tattoo wasn't wild or chaotic. It was sharp, deliberate, carved with intention, just like him. "Move," he said softly. She stepped aside, but not far enough. His arm brushed hers and a small shock ripped through her. His jaw twitched, barely noticeable, but she caught it. He felt it too. He scanned the papers, clicked his tongue once, then exhaled sharply. "These idiots can't even hide numbers correctly." "Who?" she asked. "People who owe me more than they can pay." His tone was flat, emotionless, but there was something underneath, irritation, restraint. She couldn't tell. He tossed the papers aside and straightened. As he did, the faintest line of ink peeked above his collar, black shapes curving up the side of his neck, disappearing under his shirt. Only a glimpse, but it made heat bloom low in her stomach. She knew she shouldn't look, but her eyes lingered a second too long. He noticed. Jaiwan's lips curved, not a smile, more like an acknowledgement. Something on your mind. No, she lied instantly, clearing her throat. MMM. He didn't believe her for a second. Amira tried to focus, reaching for the next stack of files. But the moment she bent forward, she sensed him again, close, watchful, the low rumble of his breathing right behind her. She froze. You're stiff, he murmured. I'm not. Relax, he said, his voice dropping lower. I'm not going to touch you. The problem was that he didn't need to. His presence alone was overwhelming. He stepped back, giving her space. For a moment, Amira could breathe. But then he started rolling up his sleeves further, slowly, deliberately, revealing the full span of ink wrapping his arms. The tattoos hugged his skin in perfect symmetry, black strokes forming intricate patterns she didn't recognize but couldn't look away from. He caught her staring again. You're curious, he said. I'm trying to understand your style. My style, he repeated, as if tasting the words. Is that what you call it? It's definitely unique. He chuckled under his breath. Most people call it intimidating. Should I be intimidated? His eyes darkened, not with anger but something else. Only if you want to be. Her stomach flipped. Jaiwan walked past her, but the back of his hand brushed hers, intentionally or not, she couldn't tell. Either way, heat shot through her like a spark catching a fuse. She swallowed hard. Do you always walk around your house like this? Like what? Like you own every room, she said before thinking. Like you're the only person who matters. He paused mid-step. Slowly, he turned his head, studying her over his shoulder. I do own every room. That's not what I meant. He stepped back toward her. One step. Another. He stopped just close enough that she had to tilt her chin up to keep eye contact. Then tell me, he said, what you meant. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. He leaned in slightly, close, but not touching. His cologne drifted around her again, warm and expensive. Ink curled like shadows across his neckline, drawing her eyes. You think I'm arrogant, he murmured. I didn't say that. You didn't need to. He held her gaze a long moment before straightening. Arrogance requires insecurity. I have none. She tried not to react, failed. And you, he continued, walking to the chair opposite her, have far too many nerves for someone working in my house. Sit. She sat, more from instinct than obedience. I'm not trying to make you nervous, he said, leaning back in his chair. Well, she muttered, you're not exactly reassuring. Should I be? She blinked. I don't know. That's the problem, he replied calmly. You don't know what to make of me. He tapped the table once, slow and deliberate. But you will. There was no threat in his voice, no heat, just certainty. Amira's heart thudded. Before she could reply, one of the household guards suddenly knocked on the door. Boss, the guard said from the other side, voice tense, we have a situation. Jaiwan's jaw tightened, but only for a second. Then the calm returned like it had never left. He didn't look irritated, didn't rush, didn't even fully stand. Handle it, he said. We tried. Jaiwan exhaled slowly, then rose from his chair. His collar shifted as he moved, exposing more of the ink climbing up the side of his neck, so dark it looked like shadows were etched into his skin. He stepped toward the door, then paused, turning his head just enough for his eyes to catch Amira. This won't take long. There was something reassuring about the line, and something dangerous too. She nodded. But just when he reached for the door, she found her voice. Jaiwan. He turned fully this time, brows raised slightly. Are you, she hesitated, unsure why she cared, are you in trouble? A slow breath left his chest. Trouble is relative. For me, this is routine. And what happens if routine becomes danger? The corner of his mouth lifted, not a smile, more like appreciation. Then you will see why people fear me. He stepped out, door shutting behind him. Amira released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She didn't know if she was drawn to him, terrified of him, or both. But she knew one thing: she couldn't look away anymore. And somehow, she suspected he felt the same. The silence in the office stretched after Jaiwan left, heavy, uncomfortable, and echoing with everything he had made her feel without even touching her. Amira tried to focus on the documents again, but her hands were unsteady. Every time she blinked, she saw the ink on his neck, those lines that traced upward like they were following his pulse. Who knew tattoos could look elegant, refined, dangerous in a beautiful way? She shook her head and forced herself to work. Minutes passed, 10, 15, then 20. The guards' muffled voices drifted down the hallway, low and tense. She tried not to worry, but her stomach knotted anyway. She didn't know why. He was a mafia boss. Situations were probably normal for him. But she still couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Finally, she stood. Just a quick look, she whispered to herself. She walked quietly down the hallway, following the faint sound of raised voices. The closer she got, the colder the air felt, like the temperature dropped with every step. She stopped at the corner before the living room, her back pressed to the wall, listening. "You think you can bring that here?" a guard snarled. A sharp thud followed. Someone grunted in pain. "You idiots," another voice hissed. "You should have stopped him outside." Then silence, a silence so sharp she felt it pierce through her. And then Jaiwan's voice, low, lethal. "I leave for 10 minutes, and this is what I return to." Chills ran down her spine. "You bring weapons into my home," he continued. "Near my staff, near me." His voice was almost calm, almost. "Do you think I'm patient? Do you think I'm merciful?" The man on the floor stuttered. "Boss, I didn't." Jaiwan didn't shout. He didn't need to. "Take him outside. I don't want blood on my floors." Amira swallowed hard. Blood. He wasn't bluffing. She wanted to step away, to hurry back into the office, to pretend she'd seen nothing, but her body wouldn't move. She couldn't turn away, not from the intensity in his voice, not from the cold, controlled violence she could feel radiating from him. But then she heard something else. A sound she wasn't expecting. Footsteps coming her way. She panicked and darted back toward the office, but she had barely made it halfway when his voice echoed down the hall. "Amira." She froze. He saw her. She turned slowly, heart pounding so loud she thought it might echo. Jaiwan stood a few meters away, sleeves still rolled up, tattoos dark against his skin, eyes unreadable. Behind him, guards dragged out a man who was groaning in pain, but Jaiwan didn't look back at them. His eyes were on her, only her. "You were listening," he said. It wasn't a question. Her throat tightened. I heard voices." "Voices," he repeated, stepping closer. "And you followed them." She nodded slowly. "And now," he murmured, "you look frightened." "I'm not frightened," she whispered. He kept walking until he stood directly in front of her. Close, too close. His cologne wrapped around her again, warm, unsettling, addictive. "You're lying," he said softly. His fingers lifted, slow, deliberate, and for one terrifying moment, she thought he was going to touch her face. But he didn't. His hand hovered at her cheek, close enough that she felt the heat of his skin. The ink across his wrist flexed when he curled his fingers the slightest bit. "You shouldn't be near situations like that," he said. "If something happened to you, my men wouldn't survive long enough to apologize." Her eyes widened. "Why are you saying that?" His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed quiet. "Because you don't understand what kind of man I am." "I understand enough," she said, surprising herself. He tilted his head slightly. "Do you?" "People fear you, but fear doesn't make someone evil." A breath escaped him, not a laugh, not a scoff. Something softer, almost surprised. "You have no idea what I've done," he said quietly. "And yet," she whispered, "I don't feel unsafe with you." That hit him. His expression shifted, just slightly, but enough for her to see something flicker in his eyes, something he wasn't used to feeling, something he didn't want to feel. "Amira," he said slowly, "you don't understand the danger of saying things like that." "Then explain it." He stepped closer, so close their breaths touched. People fear me, he murmured. But the things I fear. His eyes dropped to her mouth for half a second, then back to her eyes. Those are much rarer. Her pulse stuttered. What do you fear? He didn't answer. Instead, he moved past her, walking toward the office. But he paused at the door, his hand gripping the frame hard enough to make the tendons in his forearm shift beneath the ink. Come here, he said without turning around. She followed. She didn't know why. She just knew her feet moved on their own. When she entered the office, he was standing behind the desk, leaning against it, watching her like he was studying something he didn't know how to categorize. Why were you worried? He asked. You barely know me. I don't need to know someone long to care if they're hurt. His eyes darkened, not with anger, something deeper, hotter. That, he said, is exactly the problem. He pushed off the desk and walked toward her. She stepped back instinctively, but he kept coming until her back hit the wall. He stopped right in front of her, hands at his sides, sleeves rolled, tattoos visible, breathing steady. Her heart pounded painfully fast. Amira, he said, low and careful, I need you to listen to me. She couldn't speak. If you stay in this house, and if you keep looking at me the way you're looking at me right now, his gaze dropped to her lips again. There will come a moment where I won't be able to stop myself. Her breath hitched. From what? She whispered. He leaned in, his lips almost brushing her ear. From wanting things I shouldn't want. Heat exploded through her chest. She felt his breath on her neck, warm, slow, deliberate. The faint shape of his neck tattoo peeked above his collar as he leaned closer, almost touching her but not quite. That tiny gap between them buzzed with electricity. Her hand involuntarily brushed his arm, the skin warm beneath the ink, and Jaiwan inhaled sharply, as if the single touch burned him. Don't, he whispered. Why? His forehead dropped lightly against the wall beside her. His jaw clenched so hard, she saw the tension ripple through the tattoo on his neck. Because if you touch me again, he murmured, voice hoarse now, I won't walk away this time. She could feel his restraint cracking, like a wire pulled too tight. Then tell me to stop, she whispered. Silence. Thick, loaded, dangerous. He lifted his head slowly, eyes meeting hers, dark, conflicted, burning. I can't, he said. And then, a loud crash echoed from downstairs. Jaiwan's head snapped toward the door, body instantly tensed, all softness gone. He stepped back from her, too quickly, like distance was the only thing keeping him sane. Stay here, he said, voice clipped now. Jaiwan. Stay here. He didn't wait for a reply. He was gone in seconds. And Amira stood alone in the office, breath trembling, heart racing, body still buzzing from how close he'd been, how close he'd almost been. She didn't know what happened downstairs. She didn't know who broke something. She didn't know what danger waited. But she knew one thing. Whatever happened next, the moment between them had changed everything. And neither of them could go back.